you upon request. In fact, at the end of the session, we'll be able to share that with you. All right, I'm going to be sharing my screen in a little bit, and I will officially introduce myself in case you're wondering who I am. My name is Irene. Like I said, I'm very, very passionate about people development. I work with entrepreneurs, I work with individuals, and this session means a lot to me because I'm really passionate about people showing up wholly and fully as they can, and for us to provide environments where they can actively do so. All right, and to have this conversation, I will be introducing my guest, Erica, in a little bit, but she is the lady behind today's conversation. So it will just not be me talking to you the entire time. So don't worry about that in case you are concerned. I will just share my screen in a second. Bear with me. Bear with me there. You're probably seeing a lot of things on my screen, but I will be sharing that in a second. So again, just continue to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're joining us from. If there's any questions as we go along, you'll get an opportunity to ask. There we go. I hope everyone can see my screen. Just give me a nod, give me something. I would say in my church, we say, give me a whoop whoop, but I'm not going to take you to church this morning. So if you can see my screen, that's lovely. I'm just going to go on. So like I said, we are having this conversation with Erica, who will be taking us through what she does from, a development of people perspective. Sorry, I'm just letting in a couple of people. Again, welcome to the session. Introduce yourself on the chat. If you have any questions as we go along, you can continue, you can ask. So this conversation is in collaboration with Dialogue South Africa and Thrive Guru, two organizations that are really passionate about enabling people to develop the best selves and also creating environments where they can thrive. A bit of housekeeping. Please mute your mic. That will help all of us, especially from a recording perspective. Like I said, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to use the chat function. I'll also give you an opportunity to ask if you'd like to unmute yourself. Again, keep your video off to improve your audio quality. We know what happens when all of us are trying to be on video and it just becomes a little difficult from a bandwidth perspective. Please introduce yourself in the chat. If you'd like to leave your company name there, I would not in any way endorse sharing emails unless you want to do it privately. You could always connect that way. Use the chat function, like I said, for any questions. The recording will be made available upon request. In fact, I believe that the team will share that immediately after the session once it's available. All right. Moving right along, thanks for joining us if you've just joined us. Just a bit about our organizers or the co-collaborators of this event. Dialogue South Africa, really passionate about leadership, developing leadership mindset. And what that looks like is creating conscious leaders who lead to resilient business practices, intentional cultures, I love that word, and happier and more committed people. Thrive Guru, on the other hand, is quite similar, very passion-driven about helping individuals and teams build science-based skills of mind, body, mastery, whole body well-being. If you're wondering what that hegemonic happiness means, I am also curious about it, so we'll get into it, and happiness and fulfillment. All right, and just before, just to set some context for this conversation today, and before I launch the poll, something that I found quite interesting is as we have this conversation around unlocking happiness in the science of happiness in the workplace is, I was watching a short clip with Simon Sinek and Stephen Bartlett, two really great individuals. If you haven't followed their work, it would be awesome for you to either follow their podcast or their books. They were talking about how the world of work has changed to a point where, are we expecting too much? It's a question that I want to pose to everyone that's listening today who has just joined us. So Simon puts a scenario where people used to find their sense of purpose outside work, their sense of community outside work, belonging and the political views and all that. It was not necessarily in the basket of work, but it seems like we are asking a little bit more. Are we being unrealistic? Are the systems that we have in place ready to consume or even open up space for us to thrive in cultures like that? Do we have space for us to get a sense of belonging? Something else that I found quite interesting is also the study around the relation between productivity and happiness. There's been a lot of research pieces that have been done around it. So it's also, there is, scientific evidence, and that's why Erica is quite passionate about the science of it all, because we all have experiences. We all can speak to our own individual experiences. But what's really important is, what is the science behind it? What is the correlation? And you can look up the University of Warwick study that actually came out, I believe, last year, that talks about the productivity and happiness merger or correlation. And then, I'm curious, and I'm sure you're also curious, what does it mean to be happy in the workplace? What does it actually mean to be happy as an individual? So those are some of the topics that we'll be covering today. And just indulge me for a second as I launch the poll. So you will see the poll on your screen in a bit.
Photo right now, because I want to do that forever.
Great. I wonder, Erica, just because I'm struggling to speak, I wonder if you could just chat anything about the results for those few who perhaps aren't seeing it on their screens.
Absolutely. So just what we are seeing is that it's half and half. We know this. I mean, the numbers are coming in exactly as to what all the research globally is telling us. Half of people are very satisfied. Half of people are very unsatisfied. I know the question's been set up like that, but it's about a half and half. We know in the workplace that about 41% of people say that they are generally happy, which means about 60% of people aren't. So it makes this cohort slightly happier than the norm. The factors that contribute to workplace happiness: supportive environment, growth opportunity, work-life balance, and meaning and purpose. Oh my goodness, this is what we will be talking about all day long. Supportive environment, work-life balance, meaning and purpose, sense of belonging. Those are the big ones. Autonomy and remuneration have come out as the lowest two. Very, very fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for any L&D people, any CEOs, any HR people who are on this call, people want to grow, people want to be supported. Irene, I will answer your question shortly around, are we expecting too much? But you can see people are expecting a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Erica, and thanks for your views. Very fascinating. I would have thought a couple of years ago people would have said remuneration is very important, but it's great to see how the world of work is changing. But just this is a good segue in terms of just getting us into the conversation. And as I promised, our guest today is Erica. There's a lot of interesting things that Erica does. If you Google her, if you look her up, you'll see she's a founder of Teach a Girl How to Fish, Thrive Guru. She's an author. She's a radio host. She's an international endurance runner and a dialogue facilitator. So I'm very curious to understand, Erica, how it all comes together, your passion around it, how you've built your business, what drives you. So let's get into it.
Mm-hmm. So I can bore you all. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for dialing in. And I really hope this session will be worth your while. I will speak at high velocity. So Irene, if I go too fast, please slow me down. Also, if people have questions, raise your hand in the chat. This is not a one-way. We are here together to work out what makes the world of work worthwhile. That's what we are here for. So a little bit about my background. So I've got 25 years in business strategy and organizational change, working from the shop floor right through to FTSE 100 Exco and board level. So I really, over the past 25 years, have come to understand business. That's important because it helps me to, Irene, can you keep me on view where I can see all the other participants' bubbles? Because I prefer that view. If that's possible. But so basically 20 years background in business strategy. And now I can tell you the brochure version, which you can find on LinkedIn, or I can tell you that during that period of my work life, I was very successful. My career progressed very quickly. But I wasn't happy. And probably for 20 years, I struggled with, for the first 10 years at least of my work life, even though I was following the baby boomer track of, get a job, get a degree, get another degree, get successful, get some money. I did not find happiness. And I struggled with low-grade depression at work and with low mood. And then at some point in my life, I also had a failure in my marriage. And it was actually my divorce that catapulted me into a 20-year search for what makes for a happy, worthwhile, well-lived life, where I can look back at the end and say, oh, yes, well played. And so for the past 10 years or 15 years in parallel with my corporate strategy job, I did a degree in psychology. And then I understood that psychology helps us from -10 to 0 on the scale of happiness. So how to not be ill, but it doesn't answer the questions of 0 to 10. And I was fascinated about how do you actually get to 10 in your life? How do you thrive? How do you become the best version of yourself? So I did a degree in positive psychology, a master's degree in positive psychology. And then I started that little business, Teachable to Fish in Greece, where we go on outdoor adventures. And people were coming through such extraordinary transformations during that experience that I knew I had to become a life coach to help them through the transitions they were going through. So I became a life coach. And then I understood that the real magic is when you have highly self-actualized people who are operating at their very best. And when these people have magical relationships with each other. So I became a relational, organizational system coach to unlock the golden threads between people. And then for good measure, during this entire period of working in corporate, studying and building these businesses on the side, I did 20 years of endurance running. That's why Irene had that picture of me running in the Sahara Desert, in the big deserts of the world. And the beauty was, there at the far edge of human endurance, where you think you absolutely cannot take another step because you've already been running for 100 kilometers in 50-degree heat, carrying a 7-kilogram backpack in knee-deep sand. At that place, I had the opportunity to test the skills, the practices, the behaviors, the mental artillery, if you can call it that, that helped me to become more and more resilient and to separate the wheat from the chaff. So basically, in my work with Thrive Guru, I then founded Thrive Guru in 2018. So Dialogue South Africa has been going for much longer than Thrive Guru. But in 2018, I brought all these things together, the business experience, the endurance experience, the coaching work, what really makes us thrive, what engages, what motivates us human beings. And that's the work I do now in Thrive Guru. And I bring the science of happiness and these secrets of happiness that I uncovered over a 20-year period. I bring it to schools, I bring it to organizations, I bring it into teams, because wherever I go, I see that none of this has actually been fully institutionalized. We've got this incredible body of research on what it means to live well. And yet a fraction of it, only a fraction of it has made its way systemically into our school, our L&D, our learning and development, actually our cultures, the way we live. So sorry, long introduction, but that's basically who I am, what I do, my why.
Yeah. No, absolutely relevant and fascinating, I'm sure, not just for me, but anyone who's listening. So I suppose the natural question is, why happiness? We understand your why, but is this a priority in a business? Why is it important? Why are we having this conversation?
Yeah, sure. Irene, what a beautiful and generous question. Thank you. The thing is, people don't really know this. The why is more important than what we think. And when you say the word happiness, people associate it with something that's fluffy. I hope later we'll go into the definition of really what I mean by happiness. But the Holy Grail is that life that is, and you can call it the joyful life, the happy life, the engaged life. where a human being shows up at their very best, where they are motivated, where they're energized, where they're excited about their life, where they have vitality, where they have a reason to get up in the morning, where they feel fulfilled, where they feel belonging. That's what we mean by happiness. And when we look at the global statistics, what is happening globally is actually frightening. So since 1990, global rates of depression has increased by 50% since 1990. And that was until 2017 was the measurement that was taken. In the global age of humanity, where we've never had more comfort, more choice, more autonomy, more personal wealth. Yes, I know we have a lot of poverty, but as a globe, we have moved on several standard deviations in terms of how long we live, the health that we have access to. Child mortality has literally disappeared compared to what it was before. So on every measure, we live in the golden age of humanity, and yet, while everything else is going like this, our mental health is going like this. In 2017, about 10%, 9 to 10% of South Africans were struggling with mental health. Post-COVID, so people talk about AC and BC before COVID and after COVID. But post-COVID, that figure has now increased to 33%. Irene and everybody on this call, it's not just numbers. Look at that screen and look at the bubble, the name next to you. If there's a line of 3 in a row, one of the 3 of us are not coping. That's 1 in 3. If this room had 18 to 24-year-olds, actually 18 to 24-year-olds in it, that would be 1 in 2. 50% of our young people are struggling mentally. And the feelings that they describe, a really good report to read is the Global Mental Health, State of Global Mental Health report. The feelings that our young people describe is hopelessness, anxiety, and discontent. So those are the big feelings that and sadness. The other feeling was sadness. That is the prevailing feeling for half of our youth. So from the numbers perspective, if you have a young workforce, a third to half of your workforce underwater in terms of their mental health, how can we expect our people to show up as their best, to perform, to make their targets? And so well-being has always been something that we do on the side. It's an extra additional, we offer facilities, the progressive companies offer gym memberships or discounted gym memberships. But please, don't do well-being at work. It's after hours. You go and be well. When you work, you work. So when a third of your workforce is not coping, it requires a fundamentally different approach to well-being. Then it requires a tipping point approach, a holistic approach, a theory of change approach, rather than, some people want autonomy, some people want growth, some people want a meditation app, and we don't provide employees with a theory of happiness. Why is exercise important? Why is mental mastery important? So, yeah, I can go on and on, but that's why, and Irene, the golden holy grail that we are after is an engaged human being who brings their whole self, their discretionary energy, their optimism, their creativity, their best self to work. That work is not something that, we spend 8 hours at work. No, we do not expect too much from work. We spend the majority of our waking life there. Yeah. So wanting belonging, wanting meaning and purpose. 86% of you said meaning and purpose is what gives you the most. 86. 45% said reward, money. This idea of happiness, the engaged human being, we are in the humanistic age. This is what it is, the responsibility of organizations, like we did with sustainability, and now we have ESG, environmental, social, and governance measures in your CEO scorecard. the next area where we need to do something as transformational is when it comes to human well-being. Oh, I can carry on forever. But
yeah,
stop me.
no.
Stop me.
You make a really good point about this well-being being part of a holistic approach, because what we've had is a segmented approach where, oh, let's just put a band-aid here. You can go to the gym, or you want a meditation app, there you go. So it's not synchronized to the workplace. It feels like something that we are augmenting to what we normally do. It's important, but not too important to be part of our mainstream, the way we do things, our culture. So that's such a good point. And I suppose something that I'm quite curious about, and you've mentioned it, is what are those stereotypes that you find, especially when you're working with organizations or leaders around the science of happiness, or just happiness? Is it now let's debunk the stereotypes, let's debunk the myths that we've had about happiness? Are we just asking them to create moments where people can have their kumbaya moment, where everyone is always smiling, where we have pool tables? Is that what we are asking in the workplace at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Irene, you're asking many really important questions there. What is happiness really? I mean, what is happiness at the workplace really? And what is it that we really want for people, and what people want at the workplace, where it's not just kumbaya moments and band-aids. You know, the tragedy is actually that everything we need to help people feel less mental struggle, everything we need, the research and the science already exists. How to help people to thrive, and you know, I mean, if we have to talk about the myths of happiness, the biggest myth is that one should always be in a positive mood. No, that's toxic positivity. Please, no, that's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is to have the mental mastery that we don't get stuck in negative states. What we're talking about is that we have the mental mastery to put ourselves into upward spirals of positive emotion so that we can perform at our best levels. We are also definitely not talking about always being in an enabling state. Negative emotion, negative affectivity, how we call it in positive psychology, has a very, very important place in our life. In fact, to be honest, human beings have a negativity bias. So we are, from an evolutionary perspective, wired to be focusing more on the negative than on the positive, because the payoff is greater if you focus on the negative, the lion running at you versus the sunset. We have a negativity bias. Negative emotion has a very good and important place in our life. But have we taught our people how to deal with it in a constructive way? And how to not get stuck? How can we make our negative emotions serve our best life rather than getting stuck and in a downward spiral, because negative emotions are like Velcro. You know, they attract friends, and so do positive emotion. How do we get ourselves into upward spirals of positive emotion? That's what we're talking about. And we are certainly also in positive psychology not talking about the pursuit of happiness. You know, the thing is, if you pursue happiness, you will it's like a pot at the pot at the end of the rainbow. You will never find it, because happiness is an outcome. It is an outcome of a well-lived life. And when we in positive psychology use the word happiness, what we mean by happiness is that eudaimonic happiness, that sense where your background mood of your life is one of joy, quiet joy, but not of hopelessness, depression, and a spiral of negative emotion. So the background mood of your life has an upward spiral where you experience the mind states of contentment, of peace, of calm, of equanimity, so that you can hit the pause button, so that you can choose how to respond and not react, so that you can live in that state of calm. We know in science that that is the eudaimonically happy life, is the life that feels a sense of meaning and purpose, a life that experiences fulfillment, where you are fully engaged in your life. Engagement is still the holy grail. You know, you can swap the word happiness to fully engaged, on fire, in eighth gear, whatever you want to call it. It is the life where we have a sense of belonging, where we actually have self-acceptance, where we have that feeling of, I'm enough, and so is everybody else. Eudaimonic happiness is that sense that you actually have worthwhile goals in your life that you are progressing towards, and that your life is fulfilling with that. And of course, don't forget the physical vitality, that you actually energized, you have energy to show up as the best self in your life. That's what we mean by happiness. It's not the happiness from eating an ice cream or drinking a pina colada. I mean, those things are also good, but it's the eudaimonic happiness that we are after.
Well, I know, absolutely. Somebody's going to throw away the ice cream right now. Anyway.
No, don't throw away the ice cream. It has a place. It has a
yeah,
place.
Absolutely. I'm going to take some audience questions in a bit, but you've touched on this, and I believe it's the meat of the conversation today, which is, if you were to summarize the building blocks of happiness, what would that look like? So somebody who's looking to build that up, or maybe introduce it in their company, what does that look like? Where do they start that conversation? Which is quite similar to that just came through.
Oh, fantastic, Irene. And this is such an important question, because you alluded to it earlier. You said, you know, we throw a gym membership, a Band-Aid here. We hope, we read the papers that say autonomy is critically important, meaning and purpose, but we don't actually really engage with a framework of whole person happiness. So the beautiful work that has been done in the past 25 years in the positive psychology movement, the father of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman, was the chair of the American Association of Psychology for about a 25-year period. And during this period, he was so sad that the majority of our research was aimed at how to get people to not be ill, -10 to 0. And he challenged his colleagues. He said, but what about thriving? What about, you know, languishing is not living. At 0 is not living. What about 0 to 10? And he challenged his colleagues to begin to shift their research questions to what makes human beings thrive? What makes life worthwhile? And over 25 years, they built since the start of the positive psychology movement. The research is abundant, and there are many models of well-being out there. There's Riff's model of psychological well-being at work, but the one I'm going to, there are many. There is David Rock's neural model of the 5 neurocircuits in our brain that triggers our reward systems. There are many models, but the one that stood the test of time, and the one that is actually the most robust and is being used the most across organizational coaching practices, is Dr. Martin Seligman's PERMA-V model. This is really worth it for any L&D practitioners on this call. If you want a great model that gives you a framework for holistic well-being in work, Dr. Martin Seligman's framework will give you that. What is really interesting is that the overlap with Riff's model, the overlap with David Rock's model, the overlap with what we know from research are the 5 biggest motivators at work. All of them overlap, and they say the same things. So if you're ready, I'm going to whiz through the building blocks now. And if people have questions, please stop me, because maybe they'll get tired of listening to the building blocks. There are 6 building blocks. I'm going to go through them quickly. First building block is the cultivated mind. Actually, in the PERMA-V model, it's called positive affectivity. How more often you feel positive emotion than negative emotion, to have a healthy ratio there, both have space. But the one thing that I learned in 25 years of endurance racing, Irene, is that if you can cultivate, if you can master your mind, you can master your life. Without any measure of a doubt, when you can master your mind, you can master your life. And, you know, a lot of the courses that we give in organizations now, stress resilience, mental mastery, it's all aimed at this, but it is about the ability to cultivate our thoughts and our minds and our emotions in a way that they enable us to show up as our best self. So I don't know if you know this, but we have about 35,000 to 65,000 thoughts a day. And 95% of those thoughts are on a repeat loop. Now, so the problem is what you repeat is where the neuronal connections and the neuronal circuitry get strengthened. So if you repeat a story and habitual emotions of hopelessness, anger, resentment, you know, envy, whatever, fill in the downward emotions, versus if you repeat to yourself stories and mental modes or mixtapes, you know, like a mental soundtrack of optimism, of compassion, of agency. Over time, those are the neuronal connections that get strengthened, and what we repeat is who we become. So the very first step in helping people to build that deep sense of eudaimonic happiness is to help cultivate their minds. You know, the greatest myth of happiness I have not yet described. And the greatest myth of happiness is the myth of one day when I. You know, and it's so tragic because this myth is great for consumerism, but it has trapped billions of people. It has held billions of people's happiness to ransom. And that myth is the myth of one day when I get married, I'll be happy. One day when I'm divorced. One day when I have children. One day when the children leave home. One day when I have that big job. One day when I can retire and can rest. One day when I have more money, when I have the perfect body. One day when I. And what we know in positive psychology from the research is that one day when I get to XYZ, about 2 months, more or less, do you get a hit from that achievement. And after a certain period, you get used to this new level of great fortune in your life. And then you have to actually find a new thing to progress towards to get that happiness. And we call it hedonic adaptation. And then you are forever on that treadmill of running towards the receding frontier of happiness, and you never get there. One never gets there. When you awaken from the trance of one day when I, there's unbelievable freedom there, because then you awaken to the fact that actually right now it is about how I cultivate my body, how I cultivate my mind, what I do with my emotions, how I cultivate my relationships. Second building block of happiness. That's the first one. Cultivating our mind. Second building blocks are a building block of eudaimonic happiness and well-being. Engagement. Having a hobby, for sure, for real, having a hobby. Because doing something that you love for the sake of doing it, not because of performance pressure, not because of societal pressure, doing something that you love for the sake of it, actually helps your mind to restore in ways that being busy with other activities doesn't. So for mind restoration, if you want your employees to rest, like Google, give them 10% of their work time to work on a passion project. Also drives innovation, by the way. But the second thing that happens when people engage in something that they love for the sake of doing it is that you actually begin to develop the skill of how to get into flow. Because when you do something for the sake of it without being performance driven, you build that flow muscle. And we know the flow muscle then spills over into other activities, and it's easier then to get into workflow. It's critically important. One adage goes, show me a happy man or a happy woman, and I will show you somebody who is building up a bicycle, who is cultivating exotic orchids, who is learning to play the piano, the guitar, whatever. a person with a passion project. That's the second building block of happiness. And you know, and this is the most difficult one in my coaching courses, in my courses often, because people find it self-indulgent to allow themselves to have a hobby or something that they enjoy doing. If only they but knew the benefits of how it restores them and how it helps them to build that flow muscle, organizations will at large begin to give people, like Google does, 10% opportunity to spend time on your passion project. Okay, third building block of happiness. And this is the big one. And of course, all the models tells us that this is the case, is the quality of our human relationships throughout our life. So the longest study ever on human happiness is the Grant study, been going for the past 85, almost 90 years. And the single biggest question was, what makes for a worthwhile, happy, fulfilled life? What makes us happy in the end? Is it success? Is it money? What is it? And the single greatest predictor of whether you will be alive at 85, healthy, and describing your life as happy and fulfilled, the quality of our human relationships throughout our life. And when I say quality, I don't mean quantity, quality. And how the researchers define quality is actually the kind of relationships where you can completely let your sympathetic nervous system relax, where you are fully accepted for who you are, foibles and all, where you are loved for who you are, and where you can get out of fight and flight. Because then what happens is that you actually get out of chronic stress. That's what happens. You get out of chronic stress. So those human relationships are critically important for our well-being. And the question is, in organizations, I mean, in a disconnected age, in an age where we work virtually, in an age where we are so, look at today, I long to see your faces, long to see it. I see bubbles with names. I long to see you. And the reality is, in organizations, do we really make space for people to get to know each other deeply? If I asked you, if you're a team leader on this call today, do you know the top 3 personal values of everybody in your team? Do you know their innate character strengths? So the thing that comes naturally to them, their superpower, is it humor, leadership, kindness, curiosity, continuous learning, whatever? What's their superpower? Do you know it? And the thing is, at work, we have for so long treated work as a place where you bring your head, you do your job, you leave your body and your heart outside the door. Workplaces are no longer that. Our millennials are demanding that workplaces become a place of belonging. So, third building block of happiness, our relationships. I can talk forever about the research of Dr. Barbara Fredrickson on Love 2.0, what happens in your vagus nerve and in your cardiovascular circuitry when you talk to a stranger. That's a story for another time. So the point is, our relationships is critical for our happiness. We know that. Fourth building block of happiness is what everybody is asking for. It's what you asked for today on this call. Meaning and purpose, a sense of meaning and purpose. You know, Dr. Martin Seligman and his colleagues have found, after all these years of research, that the happiest people are those people who use their innate strengths, talents, their character strengths, that thing that comes naturally to you. You know, humor, excellence, love of beauty and excellence, prudence. Prudence is another one. That thing that comes naturally to you in service of something greater than yourself. The highway, the broadest highway to happiness, is away from the ego, away from the self, towards how can I use the best of myself, my most actualized self, like Abraham Maslow said, but he stopped short. How can I use my most actualized self in service of something greater than myself? And when it comes to the workplace, you know, when we throw our purpose statements at our employees and we expect them to suddenly become passionate about the organization's purpose, that's the wrong way around. The question is, your precious life, What are your character strengths? What are the areas where you can use these character strengths more deliberately in service of your family, your faith, your business, so that work becomes a platform for meaning and purpose? And and helping people to see the meaning that their jobs have, making sure that people have meaningful work, really treating people with that kind of respect to make sure that their work connects into something greater, and that they keep getting reminded of the role that they play, that they are valuable. That's the question. That's the longing behind meaning and purpose. Am I worth something? To whom do I have meaning? To who do I have value? So meaning and purpose is a really powerful one. Fifth building block of happiness. We're almost there, and then I'm going to keep quiet. But the fifth building blocks of happiness on that route is to have worthwhile goals for our life. Now, human beings are autotelic. I mean, we are goal-driven. That's how we are wired. And in the absence of having goals in your life, one will languish. So it's not so much about achieving the goal. It's about having goals and progressing towards them and being on that pathway. And in positive psychology, we describe this human behavior as heliotropic. Human beings will tend in the direction of an imagined future. Without having set worthwhile goals for yourself, somebody else will imagine your future. Social media, the marketing companies, somebody else will do it. Worthwhile goals is one of the most incredible ways, one of the most powerful ways to help the people in your organization when they articulate their personal goals. You help set them onto that path of personal actualization of their life. And when that happens, you get an engaged human being who brings also their best self to work. And when that happens, that's when we get the happiness premium. Engage people. Sixth building block of happiness.
Oh, happiness premium. Love it.
It's the happiness premium. I mean, the statistics. We know the statistics. And actually, I think the statistics are underrated. Just think for yourself. So I know happy people are 20% more productive. Between 12 and 20%, different reports say different things.
Yeah.
36% less absenteeism, blah, blah, blah. But just think for yourself, when you are miserable at work, how much creativity do you have? How much agency? How much courage to actually say yes to stuff? Just think for yourself, how much optimism? I mean, if I could spend my entire life just to help people build the muscle of optimism, take AI. People are like, oh my God, AI is going to take our jobs. And if that is your perspective, that will become the reality, because how we think determines how we behave. How we behave impacts what then happens in our physical reality and experienced reality. Whereas if one could be more optimistic and say, how can AI help us become better human beings? We have to program these robots with behaviors, which means we have to think more carefully about our most deeply held values. Yeah. Maybe it will help us to scrub our values a little bit. So optimism. So, it's these mental muscles we need to build. Sixth building block of happiness.
Last one. Erica, that's the last one, right? Because there's a couple of questions that I'd like us to get through.
Yes, physical vitality. Physical vitality. I'm not just the head. I could stand up and show you. And thank God I'm not wearing shorts for once. But physical vitality means whole body well-being, mind, heart, body, and of course soul, if you're that way inclined. And the problem is when we do not look after how we eat, sleep, exercise, and how often we get into nature to connect with nature, we will be swimming upstream for the rest of our life in every single thing that we do. I'm not going to go into the eating and the sleeping and the nature connection, although I just want to say, if you want to recover twice as fast from stress, work stress, go into nature, our physiological biomarkers, heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol, goes down twice as fast in nature as it does in urban environments, FYI. But I'm going to leave you with the last thought on exercise. 2 weeks ago, listed one of the world's biggest listed companies flew me up to Johannesburg. The African CEO asked me to come and speak to their people about motivation and about these highways of happiness. And as a consequence of this talk, the CEO is now leading lunchtime walks in head office, outside in the sunshine. The CEO is leading those walks. Because what we know from the research is for 3 hours after 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise, and not even intense exercise, moderate exercise, you're 300% more creative. 300%, if you're a writer, if you're a student, if you are somebody designing courses, 300% more creative, 150% more productive and less prone to errors. Last week, I taught in Johannesburg at a company where it's really important to keep the error rates low and to make sure the administration is smooth. 150% increase in productivity for 3 hours after just half an hour of moving your body. One of my favorite studies is of 1,200 CEOs over a 10-year period of listed companies. The fit CEOs deliver 25% more shareholder value than the unfit CEO.
Wow.
If you're talking about market caps of $300 billion, show me the money. I would never, ever, ever employ an unfit CEO. Never, because I understand the premium. Exercise, and I'm going to leave one last thought since we started with the depression statistics. I'm going to finish on the depression statistics. I don't know if people know this, but in South Africa, we have the 9th highest suicide rate in the world. 9th highest. We have an undiagnosed depression epidemic in this country. Interestingly enough, and if you just look at the statistics on how exercise supports mental health, we have the 5th least active adult population in the world. 5th. The research shows us over and over again, one research study, 450 participants, one group got Zoloft, one group got exercise, one group got nothing. And after 16 weeks, the Zoloft group, the people who got Schedule 6 antidepressants and the exercise group, 16 weeks, they recovered more or less at the same rate and had remission from symptoms at the same rate. Irene, I'm going to leave. I'm going to stop talking after this. But here is the tragedy, or the kicker, or the hope. Here's the hope. After 6 months of them continuing exercise and continuing Zoloft, calls up #antidepressant. After 6 months, the relapse rate in the exercise regime and the relapse rate in the Zoloft group, relapse rate in the Zoloft group was 38%. Relapse to pre-treatment depression levels. In the exercise regime, relapse rate was 8%.
Oh, wow. Startling.
We've got to move our bodies. To move those 6 building blocks.
On that really good note, moving our body, and I understand that we've got 4 minutes to go, Erica.
Oh, wow.
So we
No
try
way.
to get through the questions, Erica, with the 4 minutes that we have to go. Thank you guys for being so good and being patient with us. I'll just start with Claire's question, and if you could just keep them brief so that we can get through as many as we can in the 4 minutes that we have. Hello, Erica. This is from Claire. She loves you. I just had to say that. Please help me note the main themes down: meaning and purpose, sense of well-being. What are the others?
So the 5 greatest motivators. So you're talking about the motivators, I suppose.
So the question is, the question is about, please help me note the main themes down: meaning and purpose, sense of well-being. What are the others? So I think it's just main themes around well-being.
Right. So the 6 building blocks of happiness, go and look up the PERMA V model by Dr. Martin Seligman, because that's what I've been talking about the whole time. PERMA V by Dr. Martin Seligman, and it will actually, I added V. He calls it PERMA H. I added the V 2 years before he came back and added H for health. So I added it for vitality. So the PERMA H model by Dr. Martin Seligman will give you those answers.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Erica. Just a quick one from Atata. Please speak on the conflict between motivation for happiness in workplace for I'll take this slowly. Please speak on the conflict between motivation for happiness in workplace for productivity versus well-being. The motivation often shifts the goal and can often shift the efficacy of the approach to foster happiness. I don't know if you got that.
Yeah, I'm not sure can you just read me the question again? Maybe if I can see it in the chat.
Yeah, so basically, please speak on the conflict between motivation for happiness in the workplace for productivity versus well-being. So it's the tension between the two.
I mean, there's no tension. There's no tension. The point is, if your people are not well, if you have a sales force, you're going to get 36% more sales if your people are happy and well. Now that we've described what happiness is, you know, there was an incredibly damaging study that was done several years ago with Chinese nurses, where the outcome was that the happy nurses, in the way the happiness wasn't described in the way that we describe eudaimonic happiness, fully engaged human beings, going somewhere, vital, when people have to do rote work or very monotonous work, when they're happy, they're less productive. That's actually not true at all. When people are engaged in their life, when they feel more vital, when they have the mental acuity and the mental skills to manage difficult emotions and to get into a better state, people are 10 times more productive. They bring their best self to work. They're more creative.
Absolutely. And then just a few comments. Wow, Erica, you're extremely passionate on this. Love it, love it. Thank you for that, Adele. Michelle, this is so insightful. I could listen to you all day, Erica. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Claire. Philippa, what an amazing presentation. Thank you for sharing your happiness wisdom. I feel deeply enriched. Thank you so much, Erica. That's from Diane. And Marie, this was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, Erica. Just cutting short, I suppose, would be for anyone, what are people supposed to take away from this? What is Dialogue and what is Thrive Guru doing to support leaders and individuals just to find their happiness groove? I don't want to call it a group, but just to find their happiness.
Yeah. So I'm going to finish very quickly, but it's important that people know what's available. So, of course, together with Dialogue South Africa, we facilitate these courses that teach us the science of happiness. We break them down to become modular, so we may do something just on meaning and purpose, or all the 6 building blocks of happiness and how to embed it into the organization. Because the point is, it needs to become a part of the culture and the processes. What we also do is we partner together with L&D experts, with HR, and with the CEOs of organizations to ask what are the big system and process and culture changes that need to take place so that well-being becomes part and parcel of how we operate in organizations. So thinking partnerships, and then we do one-on-one coaching, and I also deliver keynote speeches on this, on the highways of happiness and how it's a super highway to motivate people. So those 4 things: coaching, talking, facilitating courses, and thought partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Erica. I've learned so much from today's experience, and I'm sure, from just the comments on the chat, a lot of us have absorbed a lot. In case you've missed out anything, especially around the building blocks of happiness, which was really the chunk of the conversation today, we will be sending out the recording of this session. But otherwise, thank you so much for engaging with us. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Thank you for being open-minded to actually question your own biases and being open to learn. So with that said, it's been a pleasure being your host today. And I just want to wish you a fantastic day. We have left our contact details. You'll also have them on email in case you want to interact with us. So thanks, everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you, Irene, for an excellent session. Thank you so, so much.